OnX Hunt provides detailed, color-coded maps with public and private land ownership information. OnX turns your phone into a fully functional GPS, even when cell phone service is not available, and gain the confidence to hunt new areas and states. Game wardens are using OnX to make sure you are hunting in the right spot. Shouldn't you be using OnX first? Start your free 7-day trial by visiting Google Play and the App Store. This is Game Warden Wayne Saunders, and I use OnX.
Wish you could fish more, anywhere, anytime. RODgeeks, a St. Croix rods partner, has developed a 42-inch one-piece travel rod designed and built with the same technology found in St. Croix rods. This travel rod is offered as a kit that comes with the RG42 rod, spinning reel, fishing line, pliers, and tackle tray. All in a case with space for your wallet, phone, and fishing license. Just grab and go. Perfect to keep in your pickup, car, or RV. This shorty performs much like a longer rod, but is compact enough for easy storage and for on-the-go use. Make this the summer you fish more. RODgeeks.com.
Guidefitter.com. Guidefitter, bridging you to the outdoors while providing a quality platform for guides and outfitters for you to select from. Guidefitter is the best place to get discounts on gear if you're an outdoor professional. As a game warden, I'm a member of the Outdoor Government Program, which has over 80 quality brands to get discounts from. It's free to join. Yes, free to join. And all you need to do is prove that you're an active outdoor government employee. There are all kinds of products available. Apparel, boots, archery equipment, optics, backpacks, cameras, watches, ammo, anything, you name it. And while you're there, check out the articles, information, and stories that you'll be inspired from. So before you head out to work in the outdoors or start your next outdoor adventure, check out Guidefitter.com and get discounts on your everyday or every so often outdoor equipment. This is Game Warden Wayne Saunders for Guidefitter.
Wireless partners building the FirstNet cellular network for AT&T in New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont to ensure first responders can always communicate in emergency situations, so you know help is on the way when you need it. Wireless Partners is partnering for success with communities, local and state government, local business, and visitors. Wireless Partners building cellular networks for you. This podcast is brought to you by Maine Operation Game Thief.
Please join me, Game Warden Wayne Saunders, and other game wardens on our adventures, protecting wildlife, saving lives, and having fun, all while serving the public and the natural resources of our planet. Listen to the tales and experiences of those who work in the outdoors while being entertained with stories about encounters with poachers, wildlife investigation, murder investigation, near-death experiences, search and rescue missions, wildlife interactions from game wardens around the country and around the world. When I retired, I realized I couldn't let go of that legacy, but rather wanted to share the passion, the commitment, and the stories of those men and women that call themselves game wardens. This is Game Warden Wayne Saunders, and this is Warden's Watch. Episode 19, Dave Lowen, Montana Fish and Wildlife, Chief of Law Enforcement. We're going to listen to Dave and I chat about Montana, and you're going to hear his passion for his state, for the resource, and for the game wardens. You're going to hear some unique things that Dave's doing in Montana to combat illegal activity, whether it's how you purchase your license. You're going to hear the passion when he talks about Montana Tip, the program where you can turn in a poacher in Montana. He's very passionate about it because he's seen it work. And we have two nationwide. If you have a tip program, you have our Operation Game Thief program, that's your way to report and help out the game wardens. And if you don't belong to International Wildlife Crime Stoppers, you should. You should go to wildlifecrimestoppers.org, and for $35, you can participate as a member. Maybe not participate in it, but you can be part of the solution. You can be part of that organization. You can stand up to protect wildlife, which is so important. But before that happens, I want to tell you a little story that you might find comical. I do. About 3 weeks ago, I was feeling sick, cold, so I took some NyQuil. I went to bed early, and I woke up to yelling, screaming, dogs barking, and it felt like it was right in my bedroom. And you know, when you take that NyQuil and you feel like that, and you just, am I having one of those dreams, that NyQuil dream that, you know, just really sucks you in? And so I actually started getting up and started waking up, and it was just so loud. And right in our bedroom, we have a big window right beside the bed, and it's a big bay window. and it's got curtains on it. So I pulled the curtains aside, and there on the corner of my deck, which is right off that window, is my son yelling. My German Shepherd is standing in front of my son, barking, and probably 4 or 5 feet in front of him is a big bull moose with his head lowered. And Andrew's screaming at the dog, and his dog was running around as well, and he grabbed his dog and pulled his dog in there. But Andrew was heading into the hot tub, so he's standing there in his shorts. The dog's barking at this moose, and my wife is screaming in the background for Andrew to get out of there because she doesn't want Andrew to get hurt, and Andrew's not going to leave without the dogs. So this is quite the standoff, and my German Shepherd is just proud as proud can be because he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's protecting the house, and he almost got a smile on his face as he's barking at this big moose. And this moose has just got his head down, antlers showing, and this is all occurring probably 10 feet from my window and 10 feet from my kid. So I jump out, I grab a pair of shorts, and I go around, and by the time I get there, Andrew's already got both dogs in the door, and my wife's happy. It took me a little time to get orientated due to the NyQuil, but that was the story that I woke up to, and who knows even know what a time it was. Andrew, on his way to the hot tub, opens the door, and it all begins. I thought it was pretty comical. That's what you get for living where moose live. And that was an experience I'll be able to share with you guys and be able to share with a lot more people in the future. So anyways, we're going to go to Montana now. We're going to hang out with Dave Lowen. We're going to hear the stories from Montana and what's going on there. So thank you for listening to Warden's Watch. Please share with your friends. Please share on Facebook, like me, Instagram. All of that helps support Warden's Watch. And I really appreciate each and every listener out there for your support, for your game wardens, and for your natural resources around the world.
I got to tell you, every time I think about the Montana or I say the word, I just get excited because it just in my mind, it's like the next to Alaska. They're probably on equal terms, but it's like the most awesome place to be a game warden is what I can imagine.
It is, and actually we're better than Alaska. So
no, I love that you said that.
No, it's an incredible place, and happy to be there. And it's got a nickname, the last best place, and that's exactly what it is. It's just an incredible place to be, and it's an incredible place to be a game warden. And I've cherished every day I've spent in the field.
And the species you have of wildlife is so diverse. Do you have a favorite species?
Well, growing up in Southwest Montana, I've always.
Can you describe Southwest Montana to me? Because I think of the big mountains, the gorgeous terrain. Is that the same in the Southwest?
That's it.
Okay.
Western Montana. I grew up, in the southern part of that area, and primarily did elk hunting.
Okay.
Mule deer hunting, some whitetail hunting.
And you grew up doing that?
Grew up doing that, and my favorite, and still is elk hunting.
Okay.
Obviously, it gets a little tougher as you get older. The knees aren't as good as they used to be, but that's what I grew up doing. That's what my passion is, and that's what led me to conservation law enforcement is just that passion for the outdoors and the passion for doing law enforcement and being outside. I could have gone down that road of being a deputy sheriff or being a police officer or something like that. But I just had this passion for being in the outdoors and wanted to be involved in conservation law enforcement. And as soon as a Montana game warden hit on my radar screen, I thought that's what I need to do for a living. And I pursued it passionately and been doing it ever since.
And did you prep yourself? I know you had some time other places.
Yeah, I spent some time in the Coast Guard. So I graduated from high school down in Southwest Montana. Butte, Montana is where I grew up.
Okay.
And graduated from there and immediately went into the Coast Guard. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. Spent time
from Montana to the Coast Guard.
It was culture shock, man.
It had to be
culture shock. I did 4 years in Southern California doing search and rescue and drug interdiction. I was 18, 19 years old. It was incredible. Had a great time, but I always wanted to get back home. So I did my 4 years in the Coast Guard. Ended up coming back home to Montana and was still struggling what to do. Didn't know where what was my niche. What did I want to do?
Got your sea legs, then you took them away, kind of.
Yeah. So I ended up doing a few odd jobs here and there, and I decided I need to get a college degree. So I built up a little college fund while I was in the Coast Guard, through their program, and so I went to college. And I got a degree in teaching. I got a teaching degree and majored in biology, and figured, well, that's probably where I'll end up is being a teacher. But I always had that.
And let's face it, you are.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's come in handy several times.
I bet it's come in extremely handy.
Times. But I always had that little itch in the back of my brain that says, what about that game warden job that you wanted when you were a little kid? And,
yeah, I kept calling.
Yeah, and I didn't know if I'd get there or not. And I was satisfied with where I was, and all of a sudden, I was a late starter. I didn't start into this.
I don't think you were satisfied.
No, I wasn't, and I didn't get started as a game warden until my early 30s. So it took me that long to get there, and I thought it's either now or never. Mm-hmm. And so I applied, and I put everything I had into it, and I did well, and I got accepted, and that's where I've been. So loving every minute of it since.
Yeah, and I always think the years I began, those are always the ones I go back to because the joy of it. I know you're chief now, and that's a whole different set of challenges. But remember your first day with your cruiser out there by yourself. It's just.
I remember, we talked about culture shock when I went to California in the Coast Guard, and that was culture shock. Being from, coming from the mountains of Montana and going down there. My first duty station as a game warden here in Montana was up in Glasgow, northeast Montana. I didn't even know it existed. It was just a remote location. You want to talk about culture shock. Take somebody from the mountains on the west side, stick them in the flatlands on the east. And I thought, when I got up there, I thought I have just made the biggest mistake of my life by signing up to do this job because I cannot handle it up here.
So that was more remote than where you were?
Absolutely. It was just a small rural community. And I thought, I really... A
couple hundred people in the community?
I think there's a few thousand people in the county itself, but it's real small community, and I just never been there before, and I thought I don't know if this is right for me or not, and maybe I made a mistake, maybe I'm not cut out to be a game warden, I don't know. Started working and went through the first winter up there, and was pretty sure that I had screwed up.
Yeah, winters are tough.
That's a tough winter up there.
Yeah.
But I spent 3 years up there, and it was the best 3 years of my career. Because I learned so much up there. I had fantastic field training officers. I had fantastic mentors up there. Everything about it. I learned so much up there.
And sometimes, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe not. Sometimes it's about the people that you're working with and not where you're doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I became ingrained in the community up there. I love the community. And met my wife up there. And
that's funny. I met my wife in my first patrol area too.
So it was really great. And still to this day, I look forward to revisiting, going up there for a meeting or something else that we have to go up there for. I really like getting back to that. But I learned so much in that first 3 years, being in that small rural community that I carry with me today. And the people that I worked with up there and the field training officers that I had at the time, I stay in contact with them. They have a lot to offer, and I just really, that was a real crucial time in my life and in my career. Was that first 3 years being in that remote location, learning how to do the job, and I don't think I could have gotten that anywhere else. So I'm real thankful for that.
Yeah, and when I hear you talk that they have a lot of their field training officers still have a lot of input, I can still see you still rely on those foundational game wardens to help you in your tough job as being the chief of law enforcement.
Oh, absolutely. Just because you're the chief doesn't mean you know everything. And believe me, the wardens out there will tell you that. It takes a team effort to get this job done, and you have to rely on those people that have been around a whole lot longer than I've been around, doing the job a lot longer than I've been doing it. I rely on them,
right? And
I think we have to. It's not anything that I can do by myself. It takes a team, and we're gonna disagree on some things every now and then. We got to make some tough decisions every now and then. But you need that team effort, and I rely on these people to give me the input and the information that I need to try to make the best decisions that we can make.
Nope, that's very well said. So you were sergeant as well. Does that mean a patrol move as well?
Yeah. So I ended up coming from northeast Montana as a field warden. I ended up coming down to the state's capital in Helena, Montana, as also a field warden. It was just a lateral transfer at the time, and it was going from a rural district to a very populated district.
Wow.
in Helena, which I really enjoyed, but it was a different environment to work in.
A lot more complaints too, huh?
A lot more complaints, a lot more people, a lot more recreation, just a lot more of everything. Three really big lakes right there outside of town, 5-10 minutes.
Your Coast Guard experience came in very good for that, I would imagine.
That came in very handy. That was one of the draws for me, was to get close to the water. I just like being on the water. So I ended up being a field warden there for several years, and then an opening came open in Helena for a sergeant position. I applied for that and got that. So I was then supervising the Helena area and some of the surroundings. So I had a handful of wardens that I supervised, and did that for several years. And I think that probably that was one of the best jobs I've ever had, is being that first line supervisor, being that sergeant, being able to mentor new guys, and being able to still learn from the older guys, and just being able to help and see guys make progress on cases and help point them in the right direction, and just kind of having your fingers in a little bit of everything that's going on, and quality people.
You build up a little pride in that.
You do,
especially as you see them progress from, as Eddie Henderson called it, the baby game warden, to the guy that's progressed. And I think 5 years, it puts a pretty salty game warden on, being trained correctly.
Right, and it makes you want to go, pat them on the head and say, that's
well
that's
done,
awesome, yeah. And so you get to kind of live vicariously through them when they're doing a good
You're right.
job.
Their cases are your cases. They're calling you. They're bouncing things off you.
It's really
they're getting
cool.
your input.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things about that sergeant job that I had is it was a remote sergeant position. By remote, I mean it wasn't attached to or in a headquarters facility. So I was in a separate office facility with my wardens down there. So not all of the sergeants are that lucky. A lot of the sergeants are attached into a headquarters office somewhere. So I didn't have to suffer through that. But
you do now.
But now as the chief, yeah. So exactly.
Funny how things change.
Oh, it is. It is.
And I think it's good that guys come up through the ranks, learn those positions as they go, and become chiefs, because you bring so much experience with you. Every chief, every fishing game chief that I've interviewed, everybody I know brings that with them, and it makes for a better agency.
It does. You have to have, in my opinion, you have to have that ground level experience. You have to have been there and done that. So when you're making decisions, a lot of times when I'm making a decision, one of the first things I think about is, how is this going to affect the field? If I was still in the field, what would I think about this decision? And I struggle with that sometimes, because I know I have to make a decision, but I also know from the field perspective, it's not either going to be popular, or it's not going to be maybe the most efficient thing to do, but it still has to be done. So I do struggle with that, but I don't think that you can make those decisions unless you've been on the ground and worked. And I think that my 15 plus years or more out on the ground really laid a good solid foundation for me to be able to do this job that I have now. So without that, and I've heard horror stories in other states where maybe their chief of law enforcement or their colonel or someone like that is appointed or picked from someplace else that doesn't have any of that experience. And I struggle with that too, because I think, how can you possibly, really understand what's going on the ground,
right,
unless you've been out there?
Exactly. And some of those guys that appointed are smart enough to take experienced people and draw that experience in and do good work with other people's experience. But yeah, it's tough. It's hard. I would agree to put somebody in that position. You have to be a special person to be effective and do a good job for the wardens. So.
You do, and I think that in particular, having having cut my teeth in eastern Montana for those first 3 years in that community, that in a place that I'd never experienced before, then transition to a more populated area. I think I have a pretty broad experience level that helps me understand what's going on the ground. It doesn't mean I know everything that's going on out there, but I've experienced a lot, so I can communicate and commiserate with the wardens that are out there, and try to get the best results and the best decisions that we can get.
Did you grow up with horses?
I did not.
Okay.
That's one thing I did not grow up with experience with was any type of horse work. So my exposure to horses and any type of livestock wasn't until I got this job.
And Montana game wardens use horses, right?
We do. We have a lot of backcountry areas in western Montana. So some of the game wardens use them quite a bit more than other wardens, depending on what kind of backcountry they have. We help the Forest Service a lot with what they have going on in the backcountry. Mm-hmm. So our wardens and Forest Service LEOs will work together a lot on going into the backcountry and doing different things. So we do spend time in the backcountry, especially up in northwest Montana, western Montana. We do, but we've used horses all over the state. We used to use horses a lot down in the Yellowstone area. In the Gardner area, so we do a lot of packing. We pack, a lot of.
And you had to learn all that.
You got to learn all that. Some wardens, but it's like any district. If your district is a water district, you got to learn how to drive a boat.
Yep.
If you got a horse district, you're going to learn how to ride a horse or a mule. So it all depends on where you're at. Not all of our wardens, definitely not all of our wardens are horse people, and some of them wouldn't want it any other way.
Right.
And they're good at it. And
yes.
That's the kind of people we want in those backcountry districts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, like I get seasick, so the Coast Guard wouldn't have been for me. The Navy wasn't for me.
Yeah, I used to get seasick all the time.
Yeah. I could handle a horse. I grew up around horses, so that kind of that picture of riding a horse in Montana as a game warden is just I just picture that, and I just picture that is incredibly awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. Those the wardens that we have doing backcountry work or any kind of horse work, they love it. Mm-hmm. They love it. It's a tool. It's a tool that we have to use in some of the places that we have to work. And
to get there, you got to ride a horse.
We've got wardens that we've hired that don't have any snowmobile experience, but you've got to learn how to ride a snowmobile. Right. You don't have to be an expert, in snowmobile work, or we don't expect you to be a professional rodeo cowboy either. But you've got to learn to use the tools for your district.
And those are all aspects that you guys train in as well.
All of these things we train in, and then you specialize in it if it's in your district.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Great. And then when you need resources for that specialized, you bring in these people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, that's pretty neat. The whole horse thing I just find fascinating and, nostalgic and,
expensive.
Expensive, yes. I'm sure that's a wicked expense for the agency.
Yeah.
Vet bills. I mean, I think of the canines, canines cost us. I can't imagine what horses would cost you.
Sure. And then that's one thing that we just started this year too, or last year, is we have 2 canine units.
Nice. Any specific breed that you're using?
I believe they're both breeds of, I think one's a Dutch
Shepherd,
I think, and the other one's a German Shepherd.
Great.
And they're scent dogs. That's what they're for. Article search, they do a fantastic job. Mm-hmm. They train. Our 2 canine officers are top notch.
Nice.
They train their dogs, work with them. They're certified. We've
send them to Idaho to train.
We just went to Colorado.
Okay.
But they re-up every year, recertify every year.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing if it's a pilot program now.
Yeah.
We're going to see if we're going to expand it.
Right.
Or at least at a minimum, make it a permanent program.
Nice.
Because I'm fully behind it. I think that, what we've seen those canine units do, those dogs are just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Our guys have them, our handlers have them trained in article location, scent, detection, human, they can track humans, all kinds of different things that they're doing, and they're assisting other agencies. We've gone in and helped police departments look for firearms, sheriff's offices, highway patrol. We've helped all these agencies with our canine unit. So the word is out that we have them, and
that they're good,
and they're very good.
Because when they're good, word gets out.
They're very good.
Yeah. Because if you know the good dogs, the bad dogs, you know who to call and who not to call.
Exactly.
That's part of being a police officer, sheriff, trooper, or a game warden. You automatically knows those things, and when you're good, you get called all the time.
Yeah, these guys get called, and they would like to be called even more. They just love what they do. So
in cases, I mean, big game cases, and I don't ever want to put anything on the fish because I always forget fish, but I love making fish cases too. But any big game cases that stick out in your mind that you could share with us?
Sure. Big game cases are always sexy, as I say.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. The fish aren't so sexy.
No, they're not.
They're just as important, but yeah.
In particular, I had a case a few years back. I was working in the Helena area, and I'd received this call about an elk, and this is in January. Yeah, so obviously elk season is over, and folks had called and said, hey, there's an elk up here that's head cut off. Every game warden in the country has gotten that call, one way or another, about a headless this or a headless that.
Right. I've never had a headless elk.
Well,
I'm just saying. I've had headless a lot of other things. Never had a headless elk. So I'm already jealous.
So I thought, well, this is interesting, especially in the area where it was reported. It was reported in what we call the Elkhorn Mountains. The Elkhorn Mountains is a special managed hunting district where it's managed particularly to produce large bull elk. These are trophy class bull elk with a limited draw opportunity for a license, highly coveted, and people that get these, it's a once in a lifetime draw, and it's just really, really important. So when we get a report of a headless elk in the Elkhorns, it piques our interest a little bit because
big elk,
and they're big elk, and everybody knows the big elk up there, and everybody that lives in the area, drives the area, they all know the elk. Right, so everybody's watching all the time. Everybody know who.
So they kind of identify it because they know that one is a 10 by 10.
Oh yeah, they say, there's that.
No such thing as a 10 by 10, is there?
Well, there could be. It'd be a hell of an elk.
Okay.
So the people, they pay attention and they know who drew the permits and who didn't draw permits, and so everybody. It's a very self-policed area,
right?
Which
everybody's
helps.
Keeping an eye out,
right? So when the season comes and goes, that's all fine and dandy. Well, here we are in January when we get this call.
And the season's gone by now.
Season's gone. So I roll out there, and sure enough, there's this big elk body laying there, and head's gone, and it's not real close to homes. Maybe between 400 or 500 yards away from some surrounding homes. And I thought, this is odd that this elk is laying here without its head, and this is the only call we get was the next day. You clearly see, because there was some snow on it, and I clearly see that it had been there overnight. And so we started looking around and trying to figure out what was going on, and we could see where somebody came in and cut the head off, and you could see a little bit of a drag trail where they dragged the head to the side of the road, and obviously they got in a vehicle from there and took off. This is bizarre. So I started kind of canvassing the area and talking to some people, and funny enough, the day before, so this is on a Monday, I'm doing this. The day before was Super Bowl Sunday. So I started thinking, was this elk shot during the Super Bowl when everybody was paying attention to the football game?
Football, partying, noise, beer, snacks. So we were able to kind of deduce that it was shot about the third quarter of the Super Bowl. Wow.
Part of the way we figured that out was I put out a press release. Press releases are great. I put out a press release, and was looking for anybody that was in the area that day. And lo and behold, I got a phone call from a gentleman. He says, I was up in that area, and I stopped to look at that elk because it was right on the way, and the elk was just grazing out in this field. And he says, I stopped to look at that elk, and he's a photographer, and he was taking pictures.
Neat.
And he says, I saw another guy in a Jeep there, and they were looking at the elk too, but they didn't look like photographers. It looked suspicious to him. And I said, okay, well, why don't you describe that to me? And he says, it was just a Jeep Wrangler, and there was a little sticker in the back window, and I think the license plate was a themed license plate. It was a Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation license plate. But, well, that's something. That's something. So I thought, how many green Jeep Wranglers can we have in Montana with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation plates? Maybe I can do some sort of search, start with that. So I ran a search that way, and I got like 15,000 returns.
Wow.
Well, this isn't going to get me anywhere.
No. Figures Montana, Jeeps, elk.
Yeah, yep. So we kept just kind of looking.
In New Hampshire, that would have been probably like one.
That'd have been it.
Yeah.
So we kept digging on this and waiting for some more tips, and it was starting to go a little bit stale on us here. If you don't get these things within the
first 24,
it starts to get stale. So this was getting stale on us. And one of the wardens that I supervised, he was also an FTO, and he was FTOing a brand new trainee, and they were down at the river and checking some fishermen. And we had talked about this elk case, and they come walking up, my FTO and the new warden. They came walking up to the parking area after checking a bunch of fishermen, and they were walking through, and the FTO, he stopped, did a double take at the parking lot, and lo and behold, there's a Jeep Wrangler parked in the parking lot. And he remembered talking about this case, so he calls me and he said, Sarge, hey, we got this vehicle down here. This might be your rig. I'm like, what are the chances? So many of these Jeeps in town or in the state. So he walks over and he's looking at it. He says, it's got a little sticker in the back window, and it's got Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation plates. I said, well, take a look at the back bumper really close and see if you can see any blood or anything on that. And he goes, yeah, there's some blood on it.
Wow.
I says, all right, well, we got something here. Let's get the plate, and you guys just get out of there, and then we'll just follow up. So he got the plate. So now we had something to work with. So we started working with this quite a bit and did the typical investigator stuff and a bunch of background and figured out who owned the vehicle and where they were staying. It took us a while to track it down. We ended up with enough for a search warrant and figured out where these folks lived. And we took a whole team of wardens. We went in there, rolled in hot one morning before sunlight, and bad thing about it is it was a long straight driveway up to their place, so they could see us coming.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, well, let's just get in there fast and let's just do this. And we figure if we hit it early enough, we'll catch them in bed. So we got in there early enough, hit the door, knocked on the door. We didn't break the door down. Knocked on the door. They answered the door, told them what we were there for. And what I found odd is they were all awake and they were all dressed. I thought, well, that's kind of odd.
And what time did you roll in on?
It was like 5 a.m. It was pretty early.
Yeah, that was weird. It's pretty early.
Yeah. And so pulled everybody out, sat them down, told what we were there for, swept the building, and started doing the search. And went into the closet. Of course, there we were. There was the antlers for this big elk, this big trophy elk. They had stuffed in the closet of this house. So that was this overwhelming sense of we put it together. We got this elk, and I want to back up a little bit to this third quarter of the Super Bowl thing. So when we were talking to the photographer that was out there taking pictures that day, he told us what time he was there. So we looked at the time that he was there, and then we compared that to the football game, and it just came out that it was the third quarter. And I can't remember which Super Bowl, who was playing in the Super Bowl at the time, but it was an exciting game.
The Bulls weren't playing, so.
Well, there you go. So it turns out that everybody was just paying attention to the football game when this guy shot this bull elk out the window of his Jeep with a 7mm. And so we narrowed it down to that third quarter time frame. So when we found this elk, we put all the pieces together, and we were pretty close on exactly what had happened. So they're driving down the road, and they had a partner with them, and they were going to shoot the elk, and they saw the photographer come up. So they pulled the rifle back in and just talked to the photographer a little bit. The photographer drove off. They put the rifle back out. They shot this elk. The shooter jumps out of the rig, runs over to the elk. The guy in the driver's seat takes off with the Jeep. Shooter goes over and cuts the head off of the elk, drags it over. They hide behind a tree, or he hides behind a tree with the elk head. The guy driving the Jeep waits for a couple of minutes, comes back down, does a slow roll past this Jeep. Guy just jumps in the Jeep with his elk head. Off they go. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything, and that was it. So to be able to put that together was really exciting for me. I was really happy to do that, and but I think that shows you the importance of community involvement, because without that guy that was taking the pictures, if he wouldn't have given us a vehicle description, we would have been sunk.
Right.
We would have been sunk. And here we are, we put this together, and the people were outraged in that neighborhood when they saw that, one of the coveted big elkhorn elks elk was poached. So to be able to put that together, make an arrest, put somebody in jail, was very beneficial. The person was charged, several different violations, spent 20 days in jail. And in Montana, we have a trophy restitution. This elk met the standards for trophy restitution. So trophy restitution on an elk is $8,000.
Wow. So
he had to pay it not only as fines, but also that restitution value. Plus he lost his hunting, fishing, and trapping privileges for, I think, 10 years.
Nice.
Maybe it was longer. But there was a sense of, justice served. Putting that together and just putting all those pieces on what really looked like another headless critter case where we unfortunately there's a lot more that we don't solve than we do solve, and to put this together and give that back to the community and say we couldn't have done this without help from the community. It was just a real cool sequence of events, and then to put somebody in jail over it was just icing on the cake.
Yeah. During the interview, did they tell you that was their intent to use the Super Bowl as cover?
No, they had no idea.
Okay.
So, they shot that 7.
Because I'm like, geez, that was pretty smart, but apparently they weren't that smart.
They weren't using that. They weren't using that. But to shoot that elk with a high-powered rifle in that neighborhood, that was, that took some bravery for sure. Stupidity, maybe.
Yeah.
But, that was an interesting case. It was a fun case to work.
Yeah, no, and it comes back, the Super Bowl bull.
The Super Bowl bull, we have those antlers. We seized those antlers, and we have those displayed in our headquarters.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. And, we talked earlier about when we're game wardens, we don't hunt and fish quite often as much as we used to, but that those catching those poachers become our 10-point bucks, our trophy elk, so to speak. And, awesome case.
That's
to put together.
hunting for us is I'm out hunting bad guys.
Yep. We're hunting.
Trying to find a bad guy.
That's right. And we're constantly doing it.
Absolutely.
Whether we're on our day off, whether we're on our day on.
Oh, it drives my wife crazy.
Yeah.
Can you please turn it off? I'm sorry. I can't turn it off.
You can't turn it off. You're a game warden through and through.
Absolutely.
Once you start, you never stop.
Yeah.
So, but just an awesome case.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good case.
Yeah. So, and like you said, community involvement, I think every episode I talk about Operation Game Thief and how important it is. And that's no different in Montana.
In Montana, it's, we call it the Tipmont program.
Turn in a poacher?
Turn in a poacher.
I do like that.
Yeah. It works great. It gets used a ton.
Mm-hmm.
We're expanding it. We're trying to make it more recognizable, get more exposure to it. And it is, I had a case where we had a couple of knuckleheads went out and shot a whole herd antelope. They just rolled in on some antelope in the dark, in the snow, so the antelope couldn't, run quickly anywhere because they're bogged down in the snow. And these two individuals bail out of the rig, and then they just mowed this herd antelope down. With one of them had an AR-15, the other one had a Mini 14, and they just laid into this herd antelope, killed a bunch of them, and then drove off. Roll out there to investigate that.
They just shot them and left them.
Shot them and left them. As I'm driving to the scene, I wasn't to the scene yet. I was just kind of over this little rise. And as I'm getting there, the sky blackened because all the birds got up. I thought, okay, I'm getting close. Went over, and it was just carnage. It was just these antelope carcasses everywhere and blood trails, and it was just horrible. Put all that together, documented each individual antelope and metal detectors, and trying to find shell casings and all of this. And we ended up with some evidence, but it didn't really point us to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Again, put out a press release. We got an anonymous call through our tip program.
Did you use the picture of all those dead antelope in the press release?
We didn't use all of them. We took some specific pictures, and we put those in, and I think that's what did it.
I think so, too, because I've done that before with a pile of dead deer, and it enrages people.
It does.
As it enrages us when we talk about it now.
Right.
I'm like...
I wanted to put all the pictures in there, but, you can only put so much. And we ended up generating a tip call out of that, and once we got the tip call, we did some more background work. We were able to arrest the two individuals that were going to college at the time. And we rolled right into the college, and we hooked them up right in school.
Right in school.
And
nice.
Took them to jail and interviewed them, and they ended up confessing to everything, and just out being stupid.
Right.
But they were charged with felonies for that, so that's on their record.
Right.
But the importance of that was that tip program. The anonymous tipster called Tipmont and reported this. We have hundreds of these kinds of stories throughout the state of, every warden's got these stories of how crucial Tipmont and public involvement is. We can't make these cases by ourselves.
No.
We can't do it. There's no way. We'll just catch a few bad guys here and there. We need the public's involvement. We need people calling the tip hotline. We need people talking to their game wardens. We need our game wardens being, engaged in their community and promoting our tip program. The more calls we get, the better the information we get.
The more bad guys we catch.
And the more bad guys and the more resources we can protect.
Exactly.
So that's what it all comes down to, is protecting your resources, my resources, from the people that are trying to steal it from us.
Right.
So,
and as a chief, I think you put that up pretty high on your list of things that are important as far as law enforcement goes.
Absolutely. Our tip program, I don't think, has gotten the exposure that it could get. I think we need to broaden that. I think we need to expand it. I think we need to make the program bigger and better.
Sounds like you're gonna, Chief.
We're going to.
It sounds like like there's determination there.
Yeah, we're gonna make it bigger. We're gonna make it better. And that's one of the reasons that I came down to the International Wildlife Crime Stopper Conference. Is I wanted to see what's going on. I want to see what the other state programs are. I want to see what's going on out there. How can we be bigger? How can we be better? How can we be on the cutting edge of these things?
How can we get more information to make more cases, to protect more?
There's so many things going on out there that we can't keep up with. So we need the public to be helping us with our program, and if that means expanding this program, that's what we're going to do.
No, I think that's a nice goal to have, and I think it'll be extremely effective. And you just started another program that kind of caught my interest, the license fraud program. Can you share and tell us about that? Because it's the first time I've heard about that, and I think everybody will be interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So with Montana having...
I will say it's not sexy, okay?
It's definitely not sexy. But with Montana having such coveted wildlife hunting opportunities, and there's such a difference between what a resident can buy versus a non-resident, like in just about every state, people will figure out ways to cheat the system so that they can buy resident licenses and then hunt as residents. Well, we always focus on those types of that type of criminal behavior, but we it's kind of a collateral duty to our wardens or a collateral duty to our investigators is to go after the high end, what we call license fraud violations that are occurring out there.
When you say collateral duty, it's kind of a pain in the butt for them, isn't it?
It can be, yeah.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, and
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of sitting at the computer, doing research and digging up stuff.
Not really where you want your wardens.
No, we want our wardens in the field working. So, but this is important because these people are coming in and violating or unlawfully purchasing licenses, while you've got most non-residents doing it the right way. So you've got these few that are doing it the wrong way. Well, we need to target that because they're stealing the wildlife. So we came up with an idea that is there a way that we can concentrate some enforcement effort in that direction? We've often talked about, can we have a dedicated position to just look into this type of thing? It's been a little bit difficult to get rolling, but one of the key things that helped us is in Montana, our Department of Revenue and our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department can share information. So we know who's filing resident or non-resident taxes, and we know who's buying resident and non-resident licenses. So when we cross-reference those things and they don't match,
red flags.
It'll kick information out that either this person is committing tax fraud or this person is committing license fraud. And it's not 100% accurate all the time. Maybe there might be an extenuating circumstance, and that's fine. We weed through that.
Right.
But we have been able to collect millions of dollars in back taxes for the state of Montana, and we've been able to cite and prosecute dozens and dozens of people for license fraud. So now, and this is before we have a dedicated position for this. This is we're just hitting the surface. Well, now we do have the resources to commit a position to this, so we're going to do that. As a matter of fact, we're just starting it this month. We're going to have a full-time license fraud investigator. And that's all they're going to do is just dive into license fraud and tax fraud, work with our Department of Revenue, and try to dig deeper down into these cases, because you know that if you catch one person, there's a wake of people behind them that are either associated with them or that know of them. And maybe it's been going on for years.
And they're doing the same thing.
They're doing the same thing, and you know that they're shooting animals. You know that they're taking them home. You know they're hanging on their walls wherever they're from. So we're going to chase those animals down. We're going to chase as many bad guys down as we can, and we're going to start with the license fraud investigation. And wherever that leads us, that's where we're going to go. And if I have to send wardens out of state or investigators out of state to other states, do interviews and work, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to take this real serious. If it broadens into a bigger program, it does. If it stays as just a single dedicated investigator, that's fine too. I have lots of investigators out across the state. They can all help with this endeavor. But having this one dedicated position, I think it's going to just pay dividends. I think it's definitely not on the surface a very sexy position.
Right.
But I think it's got potential of being absolutely groundbreaking.
Huge deterrent.
Huge. Huge deterrent.
And now you're going to go back, and I got to imagine if it's tax fraud or license fraud. Guess what? License fraud. License fraud.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to be in trouble with us or the Department of Revenue?
Exactly. I'll wheel my trophies into you because that's exactly who I don't want to come after.
Right.
Is the Internal Revenue Service. So.
And that cooperative agreement and the cooperative relationship we have with the Department of Revenue is crucial. We don't get to see the numbers. We just get to see, are they filing as a resident or a non-resident?
Right.
We don't see any of the tax return. We don't care about that.
Right.
We just want to know, did you file as a resident or a non-resident?
Right. So when they're paying taxes as a non-resident, they're buying resident licenses, flag, investigation occurs, and then you guys figure it out from there.
And then we figure out, do you want to be cited by us or the tax folks?
Wow. And I totally understand, because it's such a coveted place to hunt, to fish, to get those trophy animals, that Probably a lot of people think that's a great way to do it, to get it a cheap way to do it. And I imagine your residents have better benefits of getting better tags, or
there's a lot of opportunities that are afforded residents over non-residents. So by design, I think that's the way every state
I would agree.
ultimately operates. So there's an incentive there to, well, I own some property in Montana, so technically I can be a resident, so I'm just going to use that property and get a P.O. box number, call myself a resident, even though I may live somewhere else in the country. That's how it starts.
Yep.
And then that person's buddy might use their address also. And then it just keeps rolling, and then it broadens. And that's just a simple way of doing it. But, there's all kinds of different loopholes that people will use to circumvent the system just to be able to buy a resident license, because it's
and get those privileges.
It's a drawing opportunity for non-residents where a resident can just buy something over the counter.
Gotcha.
And there's some opportunities that just aren't available for non-residents.
Right. So just move to Montana, you'll be all set.
Move to Montana. Well, we don't want too many people moving. We're good. I think there's a sign at the border that says we're full.
And I always, fishing, I hate to say downplay it, but I forget about fishing. But Montana, those beautiful rivers come cutting through those mountains, and fish have got to be just as important resource as the big game animals.
Fishing is incredible in Montana. We've got, I would say, arguably the best fishing in the country. The Missouri River, runs right through the heart of Montana. All the tributaries, the Yellowstone River, all of these rivers, all of these streams, the diversity of fish on whether you're on the east or the west side of the Continental Divide, it's just incredible. An incredible fisheries habitat, warm water fish, cold water fish, just about everything you can think of. Everything from paddlefish, to little stream brook trout. It's just incredible fishing opportunity from one end of the state to the other. It really is fascinating.
That makes me want to go, though. Just your description, then I'm like, yeah, that's my next trip to Montana. So, any, through your career, any fishing things that stick out in your head as far as cases? And
there's a ton of things that a warden experiences with fishing. I was fortunate enough to work up in northeast Montana around Fort Peck Reservoir up there, and that warm water fisheries up there, and that was enlightening to me. And then back down in western Montana, working along the Missouri River area. In particular, I remember one case. It's always fun to try to make a good case, a good fishing case, when you're looking at a group of anglers that are fishing, and somebody just attracts your interest for some reason, and you start watching that person. And that happened with some anglers that I was watching. And
they looked like they were from the city, didn't they?
They look like they were just, one of those things just doesn't belong. So I don't know if it was their tactics or what.
Their gear.
There's something that gave it away. So I started watching them, and I could clearly see that there was a slot limit in this section of the river where you had to put everything back that was over 18 inches. I could clearly see they weren't doing that.
They were catching some big fish.
They're catching some big fish, and that's just it's a place where big fish live. It's a great river. So they were keeping.
They had surf casting rods, didn't they?
Oh, they had some. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
So they were catching and keeping when most of the people around them were catching and releasing. So they were.
And don't those other fishermen notice that? Don't they?
They do.
Yeah,
they do. And so I go down there to check these fellas, and I thought to myself, how can I get this done pretty quickly? I want to see what they've caught, keep it friendly, and start that way. So I approached them and I asked them, "You guys are having any luck?" "Oh yeah, we've caught some fish," and I agreed with them. I said, "Yeah, I saw you catching some fish. Those look like some beauties. What do you say we get a picture of you and your fish together? I'd love to have a picture of you guys and your fish." And they ate it up. So they drug out all of their illegal fish, this stringer. Not only were they catching slot limit fish, but then they also had just a blatant over limit of fish. So the two anglers stretched their stringer out. I got back with my camera, and I says, "All right, smile for the camera." And they're holding up their illegal fish, and I'm taking evidence pictures at the same time.
Oh, man.
So it was just a classic deal. I still have that picture to this day, and
that's great.
The grins on their faces are just great.
And then when you tell them it's all illegal, I bet the frowns turned or the smiles turned upside down to frowns. Huh?
Yeah, I says, "All right, let's talk about the regulations now." And that's where it went downhill. So we ended up seizing those fish and write some citations there. But those things happen. Those things happen. So.
And those other fishermen appreciate it so much. The time of getting applause from other fishermen when you catch the guy that's it's catch and release, and they've been taking them all day, and you show up, and now you're writing a ticket. And I've had other fishermen along the river applaud, start clapping.
Absolutely. Most of the people are out there doing things right.
Right.
They're doing things right. They just want to enjoy themselves. I'm a firm believer that honest people do make honest mistakes.
Absolutely.
That's fine. We're in the education business, and that's what we should be doing, is educating those folks. Mm-hmm. Not everybody needs a ticket.
Right.
Some people do. Mm-hmm. Some people need to go to jail, but not everybody needs a ticket. Honest people make honest mistakes, and most of the people out there are doing things the right way. Right. That's what I think about. I used to think about when I was out in the field is I'm here for them. Mm-hmm. I'm taking care of this poaching incident or this overlimit incident or this bad guy here, because those people over there that are doing it right deserve that. They deserve for me to be taking care of the things that need to be taken care of. Because as a parent, I want my kids to be able to experience the things I've experienced, and somebody has to be out there protecting that and taking care of that. And right. I've always looked at that as that's a game warden's job.
Absolutely.
Promote the good and take care of the bad.
Yep. And you got some pretty remote game wardens in Montana, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Population 1 maybe in the county.
I think if we had to put an average on it, I think on average our warden districts are about 2,000 square miles. Some of the districts are a little bit smaller, but they're more populated. Right. So you have a lot more interactions with people. Some of the warden districts are incredibly enormous with fewer people, but it's a lot of country to cover. Right. So
and how many other law enforcement people live in that area as well?
Yeah, some of these.
I think of backup.
Some of these warden districts, you've got your deputy sheriff, your highway patrolman, and your game warden. And that's it. That's it. Some of our bigger counties, you obviously have a bigger sheriff's office and a police department, things like that. But some of our smaller counties, smaller warden districts, boy, there's just not much there.
Right.
And then even in the places where we might have some more strategically located law enforcement help, they always can't get to where we're at.
Right.
We're driving 4-wheel drive 3/4-ton trucks up in the mountains. Mm-hmm. They're driving a Dodge Charger.
And then you're taking a horse over the next ridge too.
Right. So that there's times that just because we have law enforcement available to us, they can't often help us because of our remote locations and where we're at. Oftentimes they can, but not always. Right. So just the remoteness of Montana and some of the remoteness of our districts. Montana is the 4th biggest state in the nation, and we have on the ground about 80 game wardens. That's certainly not very many.
No,
to cover that entire state.
Not for the 4th largest state.
It's huge.
Yeah, and I bet those other 3 states have quite a few more game wardens than Montana.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
California is one of them, and I know they got a ton of game wardens.
They got a ton of game
But we don't
wardens.
Want that population.
No. And that's right. With population comes other responsibilities.
Absolutely.
Because when people come in conflict, whether it's wildlife or incidents, people create the work. It's because if we left the game alone, we wouldn't have any job.
That's right.
It's the interaction, whether it's poaching, whether it's animal relationships, the bears getting into the garbage and do you ever have grizzlies getting into the garbage?
Oh, we have grizzly bear problems all the time.
Really?
Western Montana, we've got a growing grizzly bear population, from the north coming down to the south, and then obviously from the south coming from that Yellowstone area further north. So we're having an increasing number of grizzly bear problems. We are trapping a lot of grizzly bears and trying to move them, a lot of conflict bears. We're putting bears down because there's just no place to put them. Mm-hmm. We have a handful of human interactions with grizzly bears every year where, somebody will get injured or in some cases killed by grizzly bears. So we have a severely increasing grizzly bear problem it's growing, and, the state is going to have to come to a point where, we're going to have to begin to manage the bears as a huntable species. But right now, they're still on the endangered species list. Mm-hmm. We have to work with the state of Idaho and the state of Wyoming to work through all of this. So it's kind of coming to a head now, and I think we're going to see it probably get a little bit worse before it gets any better. But we definitely have a grizzly bear problem, and we've always had a robust black bear population. I wouldn't call it a robust black bear problem because we can hunt black bear over the counter.
So you can manage that population through
a little easier managed. Yeah. And of course, with no federal oversight on black bears, it makes it a lot easier to manage it by the state.
Is there a process starting to delist the grizzlies in those areas, or is it just starting?
No, there's been ongoing litigation, ongoing problems, ongoing this, ongoing that. Our agency attorneys are are definitely involved in trying to work through all of this complicated process.
And in the interim, we have grizzly conflicts.
We have grizzly conflicts. We're pretty good at managing the conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
But
Is it usually a people problem, or grizzlies getting associated with people, or?
I think it is to a certain extent. I think it's just a population problem where we run out of places to put bears.
Yes.
Bears will come out and they'll get in trouble. We'll trap them, we'll tag them, we'll take them someplace else. And, that's a 50-50 chance or whether that's going to work or not.
Right.
And then if they end up in a problem again, we have to make that tough call about putting the bear down.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the most popular decision, but you really run out of options real quick.
Right.
And those are things that our wildlife division, more of our biologists and our bear specialists deal with. Enforcement guys, we help out on that as much as we can. But those are things that are handled mostly by the wildlife division.
Yep.
So.
Well, that's good. Except on the weekends, I'm sure that's when the game warden gets
That's when the game warden becomes a bear expert. Game wardens are experts on everything on the weekends.
Oh, when I think about those remote officers and working like that, we talked about in the line of duty deaths, and I could tell right away when you brought that up that you get it's a soft spot for you. So
yeah, line of duty deaths, that's always a tough one. And Montana game wardens, we've lost officers. We've lost 9 officers total since the inception of Montana game wardens. The first one we lost was Warden Peyton back in 1901. The last one we lost was Warden Gene Serra in Thompson Falls, Montana, and that was in the 70s. So knock on wood, we haven't lost anyone in the line of duty since. But still, it's such a dangerous job that we do. Everybody that we deal with is armed. As a game warden, you're going to go out there and you're going to interact with hunters and fishermen out in the wilderness, out in the woods, out next to a river somewhere. Most people are going to be armed, carrying a pistol or a rifle or a shotgun for whatever reason they're doing it. So it's a dangerous job. We're by ourselves, remote locations, no backup. Sometimes the communications are a little hinky. So it's just a dangerous job. We've lost 9 officers, which is the second most in the state of Montana of all the agencies. It's definitely not a record that we're looking to set. It's nothing that we're proud of, but I think it's illustrative of the dangers of the work that we do. So,
and as a chief, it's always on your mind.
It's constantly on my mind. It's
sooner
nerve-wracking.
or later, it's going to happen again at some point.
It is, and it's nerve-wracking because you want to be prepared for it, and I don't know if you ever can be prepared for it. We've put some things in place here recently where we have some protocols, kind of a go-to book or a manual that supervisors can use to quickly manage an incident.
Right.
If it happens. We used some of what Maine put together and some of the other states have put together. And unfortunately, a lot of times those things are put together, after they have an incident.
Right.
What we're trying to do is have something put together before we have an incident.
Smart.
And I think we have a really good protocol put together. It's not perfect, but it'll help manage the incident so that we can at least get through it. So that's what we're looking at. Officer safety is primary on my radar. I want my wardens being safe. I want the safest working conditions we can provide for them, knowing that by default it's a dangerous job. That's where we're at.
And some of these Montana wardens you referenced died in a gun battle.
We had 2. The first warden we lost was killed in a gun battle up in the Swan, and then Warden Gene Serra, he was killed in a gunfight in Thompson Falls, backing up a deputy on a domestic disturbance. And that was before, believe it or not, in the 70s when Warden Serra was killed, that was before wardens carried guns. So he had a gun, but it was behind the seat in his truck. So as he rolled up on this assist with the deputy sheriff, there was some shots fired. So he went to his vehicle to get his gun, and as he's trying to get his gun out, he was shot. So again, after the fact is when game wardens started carrying guns. Yeah, that was a tragic event. We have a memorial shooting competition in honor of Warden Serra every year. So the wardens all do a competitive shoot, and it's just a way to honor his memory and
carries on his name.
It really does. It really does. So yeah,
and it also reminds those game wardens that this is a dangerous job. Reminds the public that this is a dangerous job. We carry guns for a reason. We're put in dangerous situations on a constant basis because we are the police in the woods. We respond to those. We back up officers. They back us up. I don't think the public really understands how dangerous a game warden's job is, because I think statistically the FBI comes out with their stats, and the conservation law seems to be on the higher end of in the line of incidents with firearms and assaults. And I think you hit all those points: remote working, just the type that when we have to have that conflict, it's there. It's sometimes caught in the act. So there's a lot of things that roll into that put us on that edge and dealing with armed people on a constant basis. And
I think one of the things that helps us there is game wardens are really good at talking to people. We a lot of times we're not being called to the scene of a crime or there's not a crime in progress, and there's a lot of times we are just making a contact. Where we are just inserting ourselves into somebody's recreational day. And we're carrying on a conversation with them, and we get really good at communicating and talking with the public and doing that whole community policing type of approach to things.
And reading people, reading body language.
Really, we really do. And I think that when we have a violation or a situation that's going to maybe escalate, wardens by default and by training and by experience, I think are really good at de-escalating that, some better than others. But I think I think wardens are really good at managing a situation verbally, which prevents things from escalating to a physical assault. And I've seen that time and time again, where you might not have that experience with say a city police officer or sheriff's deputy, where things could escalate.
Right.
Where a warden is out there by himself, and they have to think, I've got to keep this under control because there's nobody to help me. So we developed our verbal skills to a point where we can control the situation, and I think that has helped prevent officer assaults.
Right.
They still happen, but it's...
And you must have been around when that verbal judo came out, because I went to some of those classes, and it was the stuff that we already did as game wardens, because we had that...
Oh, yeah.
That interaction with people, and we knew how to de-escalate situations, and and now they're teaching police officers, probably because they don't spend as much time interacting with people. They go to a call, they have to address the call, and then they move on.
Right.
So trying to give the skills that the game warden had to the police officer, those verbal judos, and I think we've gone away from it because I don't remember a verbal judo class anytime recently.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, and the whole community policing concept, when they talk about, well, we're going to shift, urban law enforcement to a more community policing way of doing things and interacting with the community and being involved with the community. And I'm thinking, you mean like game wardens do? You mean like we've been doing for years?
Right.
We're the epitome of community policing. That's what we do.
Right.
We contact people. We interact with people without being called to an incident.
Right.
That's called community policing, and it's what we've been doing for years, and it's our bread and butter.
Yeah, and it deters violators because they know your reputation, they know you, and there was a study done, I think it was for the University of Wisconsin, where they interviewed early shooting duck hunters and the ones that didn't shoot early, and a lot of the reason was because of their interaction with the local game warden. It's like, I see him at the softball games, I couldn't do that because I couldn't look him at the eye if I was
Right.
violating the law.
I remember a couple of incidents where once you're the warden for long enough, some of the 11 and 12-year-olds that you might have in a hunter education class, all of a sudden you encounter them 10 years later out in the field after they may have committed a violation. And I've had this happen where I recognize a name and I look at them and I said, didn't I have you in hunter ed class? Yeah. And the disappointment on their faces that they just let me down, is priceless, because it's not about that they're going to get a ticket. It's that they let the game warden down.
Yep.
And that's meaningful. That's impactful. They still made a dumb mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake, but it's impactful when you can interact with the future hunters at that age and make that that impact on their thought process. So it's very important. We're in the education business. We're in the community policing business. That's what we do.
So you did get the right degree there, Chief.
I think I did.
Yeah,
it's come in handy.
Yeah, and I can see that you had a passion for that hunter education too, and to teach those people on how to do things right, and to interject those fish and game laws so that they did things right.
How many times have we seen new hunters out in the field, 12, 13-year-old hunters with no mentor? The people that are teaching them are definitely not in all cases the people that should be teaching them how to hunt.
Right.
There's more to hunting than shooting an animal. We've all said that in our hunter education classes. We need to talk about conservation. We need to talk about the animal. We need to talk about everything that leads up to you pulling the trigger, and then everything that happens after you pull the trigger. There's just so many things to it. And I know that kids out there aren't all given the opportunity to learn that information. So that's why hunter education is so important, and that we teach and talk about the right things in hunter education, and that we interact with those kids and we put them on the right track. So maybe it will help prevent them from making a mistake down the road.
Yeah. And some of these trends, I know I think I know your opinion with online hunter ed and do the field day. You got an opinion on that you could actually say?
Field days are important. I love the field days when we get the kids in the field and we can actually show them stuff on the ground. I think that's great. Online hunter ed, you just don't get the same experience.
We're losing something, aren't we?
We really are. You don't have that interaction. When we can do the classroom and the game warden can walk around and talk to the kids, and then hang out with them on the field day, there's just something to that.
There is.
And I think that's really important. The online hunter ed, I think that's fine, and I think that there's probably a place for that. But you just have to realize that we are losing something. We do that.
And we got to weigh out in the long term. We got to look at the benefits versus, are we getting more poaching because we're not having any of that interaction?
Right.
Are we having more hunting incidents because we're doing it online and we're trying to fast stream everything?
And one of the problems that I know that Montana runs into is our hunter education program is based solely on volunteers. Our hunter ed instructors are all volunteers,
right?
And they're dedicated. There's not enough of them. It takes a special kind of person to be able to do that,
right?
And so it's a volunteer program. So you don't always get the amount of people that you need. Maybe you don't get the type of people that you need. And
that online's kind of filling that void.
So online fills the void, exactly. So, yeah.
No, that's a positive sign to it. So, but I'm involved in hunter safety as well. And
it's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So important.
Hey, anything else you want to say? Because we're wrapping up here. Well, one thing I got on the notes that I'd like to talk about is fire, because on the East Coast, fire doesn't really affect us, and and I've been out west when there's fire watches and fires closer. I'm pretty dang nervous about that stuff, and you guys deal with that on a real basis, and it's something I don't have any experience with. So
sure, it can get a little nerve-wracking when it dries out and we start getting into drought conditions. That timber dries out and the forest dries out and the grasses dry out. We end up with fires. We've already had fires this year. Nothing major. Knock on wood, we've had a real wet spring. We had good snowfall last winter. We've had a wet summer so far. So those are all good things. Montana game wardens aren't, directly involved in actual firefighting efforts or activities, but we do supplement and assist the Forest Service or the Department of Natural Resources or other agencies with either security or roadblocks. We help out where we can. We supplement other sheriff's offices if they're doing some traffic control, things like that. So we do have some agreements in place. We try to work where we can to help the other agencies. Everybody's spread thin. So
certainly, it probably affects the wildlife and where you work and how you work.
It does affect the wildlife. That's not a major consideration when it comes to fires. Their wildlife is pretty adaptable.
Okay.
So they can move around and do what they need to do. Really, what we're at that point when we're helping out with fires is really just a public safety thing that we're involved with.
And fire is a natural thing in Montana.
Fire is a very natural thing. Well, not all fires.
Not all fires. Okay.
Sometimes they're unnaturally set by stupidity, but a lot of them are natural lightning caused fires. A lot of them are man caused fires. We've had them both. So we assist where we can.
So. Yeah. That was just something I'm not familiar with. I thought we'd try to chat about, but
anytime you want to come out and hang out in a smoke-filled Montana skies.
I'm all set with fire.
Yeah, I bet you.
I am. My first experience this fall was hunting in Colorado, and there was a fire just before it. So everything I scouted was closed to start, which I wasn't real happy about. But I found a way around. I had to go back into Wyoming and back into Colorado in order to hunt, but I got it on open roads, so that was important, and I got to where I scouted. So when you put all that time and all that effort in, and then they close the roads on you the week before, it's just I wasn't real happy. So that's not a big fan of fire.
We've had that happen a few times where it's gotten so dry that a lot of property owners in Montana will start shutting their property down to hunting. They don't want anybody on their ground because it's just too dangerous.
Right, because a lot of hunters camp.
A lot of hunters camp, and it doesn't take much.
Right.
To get a fire going. So
no doubt. So I'll put it back in your court. Do you think we covered everything? I mean, I just you made me want to come to Montana.
Montana's a great place. I love what I do. The game wardens that work in the state of Montana, they love what they do. I think, arguably have the best game wardens in the country in Montana. Whenever we recruit, we have just an enormous list of applicants that apply.
Wow.
So we have a good pool to select from. We're just real fortunate to have the wardens that we have on the ground working right now. I think, Wayne, if there was one thing I wanted to get out there is how important it is for people to understand how dangerous game warden work is. It's incredibly rewarding, selfishly rewarding in some ways, but it's also dangerous. And I think that sometimes the public may see us as the friendly conservation guy and don't really understand how important or how dangerous that law enforcement work is that we do, and how the people that we sometimes interact with are the exact same people that a sheriff's officer or a police department are interacting with. Drugs and bad people and all those things are encroaching into the conservation world.
Right.
So it's just I guess I want people to understand that when we're out there doing our work, we're out there to protect wildlife and protect the Montana resources, but the things that are out there that are dangerous are slowly creeping into that world.
Right.
And I think will be becoming a bigger part of it. I think conservation law enforcement across the country is going to start seeing more and more that. I know some of the bigger populated states have seen an increase in certain wildlife trafficking events, drug trafficking, human trafficking. There's just a lot of that stuff that's going on out there. So while we're out there doing conservation law enforcement, protecting Montana's wildlife and resources, always on the back of our mind are all these other things that are slowly creeping into that conservation world. So just something that we need to be aware of.
Right. Well said. And this is Dave Lowen, very, very passionate, very proud of Montana game wardens, and he's the chief of law enforcement in Montana. And what a pleasure, Dave, to sit down and talk to you and get all those stories. The Super Bowl bull will always be in my mind from now on, just to get a feel for Montana. Yeah, sometimes I wish I had relocated a little. It's just, it'll always be right next to Alaska. Now you put it a little bit above Alaska. So
well, that's good. It's been absolutely my pleasure, and I absolutely appreciate this opportunity, Wayne. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Please join me, Game Warden Wayne Saunders, and other game wardens on our adventures protecting wildlife, saving lives, and having fun, all while serving the public and the natural resources of our planet. Listen to the tales and experiences of those who work in the outdoors while being entertained with stories about encounters with poachers, wildlife investigation, murder investigation, near-death experiences, search and rescue missions, wildlife interactions from game wardens around the country and around the world. When I retired, I realized I couldn't let go of that legacy, but rather wanted to share the passion, the commitment, and the stories of those men and women that call themselves game wardens. This is Game Warden Wayne Saunders, and this is Warden's Watch.